Fantastic. Okay. So yeah, if you'd like to give us a warm welcome to Willaim, you can start it off. Thank you.
Hi everyone, nice to see you all. Great. I've said hello to almost everybody, except for Sandra and Andy. So it's great to see you together. Are you in Lithuania or Hungary?
Hungary. Yeah, we're in Hungary now.
Okay, all right. I guessed Lithuania, but I guessed wrong. And Kayong, do I know you? Have I met you before? No.
Hi, no, I'm a complete foreigner to this whole group. I started joining this year. I'm all the way in South Africa, so.
Oh, South Africa. Whereabouts?
In Johannesburg.
Okay, Joburg. Okay, I used to go there. Well, I only changed flights in Joburg. My mother lived in Kloof, just outside Durban, in KwaZulu-Natal for about 25 years before she died. Yeah.
Oh,
I loved going down to South Africa. I should have recognized your accent, but I didn't.
No, my accent is a strange blend of lots of things. So I don't know. Can't really pinpoint it to one thing.
I expect coming from Joburg, you speak like an Afrikaner kind of accent, but you haven't. Where are you from then in terms of accent?
I can't tell you. I really can't tell you. It's like maybe unique to Johannesburg, maybe. Really? Lots of different accents. Yeah, you'll find here.
I don't know Joburg at all. Anyway, nice to see you. And hi, Alma. Don't worry, I've been vaccinated twice, so I won't catch anything from you. And who else is here?
Thank you. Hi. Yeah. It was a nice photo for us to use, so that's why I used it. But hi. Sorry, I didn't say it earlier.
Oh, no, it's okay. Oh, you're there twice. Oh, okay, I see. All right, okay. So as Alex said, I was going to talk about, I just need to find it. Oh, there it is. Okay, just try and organize it. Oh, okay. Yeah, gender identity and the principle. It's not quite exactly the same title as I said to Alex, but anyway, this is how it turned out when I was preparing it yesterday. Or was it this afternoon? I can't remember now. You know, I mean, it's not something I used to think about very much because it just wasn't a topic of discussion. It wasn't an issue. It wasn't something that people talked about very much. But now, as you know, it just dominates the media, social media, dominates politics. It dominates almost everything. You know, this whole identity politics, as it's often called. And there's all kinds of different kind of identity politics. And one particular sub-branch, you might say, is to do with gender identity. And so I thought, okay, try to make sense of it, try and, you know, understand it a little bit from the principal point of view. And also try to understand, which I'm particularly interested, what are the origins of these ideas? When I went to university in Manchester a long time ago, and I became very interested in the history of ideas. You know, lots of ideas that were floating around at university when I was there, lots of ideas floating around in the world today. And if you go to university, suddenly you'll be exposed to and you'll encounter all kinds of ideas, and you might wonder, where did all these ideas come from? So for me, I was always interested in the history of ideas at university, to try to understand where have these ideas come from. They didn't just spring out of nowhere. They must have a genealogy. So I was always interested in genealogy, not just of my ancestors. It's a great question there, Alex. I must remember it and try and use it one day myself for a discussion group or icebreaker, but also the genealogy of ideas, because it's ideas which shape the way in which we think. You know, what's running around our heads are ideas. And many of you have heard me talk about stories, but also view of what is right and wrong, shape our view of and the way in which we make sense of and understand the world in which we live. So I was interested in this. Well, where do these ideas come from? So some of you have been to some of my workshops, will have come across this table, so I'm not going to go through it in much detail. If you go back to Pythagoras' table of opposites, Pythagoras, of course, is a great mathematician and Greek philosopher. And he's tried to make sense of the nature of reality. He said everything is divided, everything is either one thing or the other. And he called this a table of opposites. So in terms of maths, either a number is odd or even, either you got one grape or many grapes, either you're right-handed or left-handed, male or female. Either something is moving or it's at rest, a line is either straight or crooked, light, dark, good, bad, square and oblong. Okay, so that's interesting. That's his way of trying to make sense of and categorize the world in which he lived. But it's not just the world in which he lived. This is the way that Greek people generally made sense of the nature of reality. They try to categorize the natural world. But you'll notice here, good and bad or good and evil are part of this. So their understanding then was a good and evil are woven into the fabric of the universe, which is why you get expressions like you can't have good without evil, because good and evil are both woven into the fabric of the universe. It's a form of dualism, what we would say. And so Aristotle, who recorded this, Pythagoras' ideas, commented, and he associated moral prestige with the left-hand column because good things appear in that column. And obviously bad things, inverted commas, appear in this column. And you might wonder, well, okay, what evidence do I have for that? Well, you have to do the right thing. In Russian, the word for right is also the word for truth, you know, and also that goes into handedness. People who are left-handed were treated with suspicion. The word left in Latin is sinister, which in English means evil. And so you can see there's this incredible moral overlay here. And then male was associated with good, female with evil, etc., etc., etc. Straight and curved or crooked. You say someone is straight, it means they're honest. Say someone's crooked, it means they're dishonest. These kind of associations here. And so, okay, so that's the way of making sense of nature of reality. And so this goes all the way back to Greek mythology. Hesiod, who wrote Greek mythology, or the classic of it, described the first created woman simply as kalon kakon, the beautiful evil thing. She was evil because she's beautiful, beautiful because she's evil. Being a good-looking man was fundamentally good news, handsome. Being a beautiful woman, by definition, spelt trouble. And as Aristotle said, the male is by nature superior, the female. And so these kind of basic understanding of the nature of reality, the basic understanding of the nature of what it is to be a woman and femininity, the basic understanding of the relationship between male and female, which we've experienced in Europe, but also in other parts of the world, has been shaped by Greek philosophy and Greek mythology and basic assumptions about the nature of reality that we have and we've inherited are embedded in our language, come from these kind of stories and this kind of philosophy. And then this feeds into traditional gender stereotypes of femininity and masculinity. And then, of course, this leads into the imbalance of power, lower status work, and higher status work. It's all just, you know, these are the implications of Pythagoras and Aristotle's understanding of the nature of gender relationships. And here you've got a classic 1950s advert, role stereotypes. Okay, a different way of understanding the nature of reality is the principle view, which is rooted in the biblical tradition. Here, we also have everything is either male or everything contains yin and yang. Everything in order to contains, you know, particles are either positive or negative. All atoms are made up of positive or negative particles. All molecules are made up of atoms which are either anions or cations combine together to form molecules. More complicated molecules to form organic matter. And within plants and all living creatures, you have DNA. So you have this polarity of masculinity, femininity, positive, negative, yin and yang. but good and evil don't figure in this. So there's no, so these things here, positive, masculinity, male, they're just completely neutral and descriptive. The left-hand side, femininity, negative, is just completely neutral and descriptive. In the English language and most languages, positive is also associated with being good. You're a really positive person means you're a good person. Stop being so negative. Stop being so evil. That is all the legacy of the Pythagoras and the Greek view of understanding the world, which is embedded in our language. The principal view is actually just neutral and descriptive. There's no moral overlay here at all. And so this is really important when we are talking about issues around identity and gender politics, to realize when we engage in these conversations, everybody else is speaking out of the language of Greek philosophy, the basic assumptions, which they don't even know. When we want to engage in this conversation, we want to engage in it from a different understanding of the nature of reality and a relationship between the sexes and gender. Yeah. So that's really important. So to emphasize, we're not operating out of the same basic assumptions that everybody else is operating out of, that male is good, female is bad. And we accept that there are binaries, but we reject the idea that they're binary opposites. So people talk about their binary opposites, and that's what people want to reject. We say, actually, there are binaries, but they're not opposites, they're complementary. Dual characteristics are complementary. They're not opposites, they don't repel. There's not a, as it is in Greek philosophy. Yeah, subject, object, and the principle is not a power relationship. You read the principle, it's very different understanding. So we accept there are binaries, dual characteristics, but we reject the idea of binary opposites. So we're not engaged in the same discourse or accepting the same assumptions that everybody else has in the conversation. So we're talking about binary pairs which are complementary and have equal value. So, okay, so what is sex then? So you got male and female, and you got, so again, you go back to what is the nature of reality? And so the nature of all living organisms, they're all based upon DNA, which is a double helix, which is base pairs, okay? Pairs, they're binary base pairs, which are complementary. Can't remember which ones attract which ones now, but they're all base pairs. And then when there's multiplication, then this DNA unravels and another daughter strand wraps itself around and the DNA is replicated. And then in terms of, well, okay, how does it work in terms of human chromosomes? You all know this. Got 22 pairs of chromosomes, 1 pair of sex chromosomes. So, and then how can you tell whether you're male or female in terms of sex? If you're female, you've got XX. If you're male, you're XY. 99.9% of people are either XX or XY. There's a tiny fraction of percent of people, there's some confusion about this, okay? I personally think this is terribly unfair. I think there should be a law against this, because I think it's deeply unfair and unjust that women should have more DNA than men. Obviously, women have got more DNA than men. It means obviously they're an upgraded model because of the DNA that counts. Okay, so what determines whether you turn out male or female? From the father, you get either an X or a Y, and from a mother, you get one of the X's. And if you're a son, you got an X and a Y. If you're a daughter, you got an X and an X. That's just the way it is. This is the nature of reality. Yeah, 99.9% it's like this. Sex is determined in this way. Sex isn't assigned. Nowadays, people talk, oh, sex isn't assigned. You're assigned your gender. You're assigned your sex. It's not. You're either XX or XY. That's it. You know. And not only are the genitals different, again, a tiny fraction of people that are intersex, or there's a bit of confusion about the sexual organs, but also it affects the brain. This is a typical male brain, typical female brain. It's just statistically, that's the way it is. There's a difference, not only in terms of sexual organs, but also in terms of, well, maybe this affects, if the brain is, the physical brain is structured differently, maybe what's going on inside the brain is different. When my sons come home from school, My wife says, "How was your day?" They say, "Fine." My daughter came home from school. My wife says, "How's your day?" And there's a long story about all the emotional ups and downs and roller coasters that she went through. And it's just the way it is. And typical stereotypical, two brothers, two boys, same shirts. They feel, oh, connected. Two girls, the same shirt. And that's why celebrities, when they walk into the ballroom, they scan the room. If they see somebody wearing the same dress as them, they go up and they change and come down with a different dress, just the way it is. Packing's different, and the brain, the thoughts that go on and dominate the male brain and dominate the female brain are also very, very different. And people need to understand that. And again, from a psychological point of view, in terms of pedagogy, physiologically, as I said, often in my workshops, men and women don't see the same way because the physiology of the male and female eyes is different. Babies, male and female babies react differently, play differently. Mothers and fathers interact differently. There's so many differences. These are just scientifically shown differences. It's not, and that's just the way it is. Okay, so how do we deal with this? So another passage from the principle I just want to read out is this. Even though atoms become positive or negative ions after ionization, so they either become cations or anions, depending upon whatever, each still consists of a positive nucleus and a negative electrons in stable unity. Yeah, so a positively charged atom is still made up of protons and electrons and neutrons, obviously, and a negatively charged atom is still made up of protons, electrons, and neutrons. Similarly, each animal, whether male or female, maintains its life through reciprocal relationships of yang and yin elements within itself. So a species, for example, if there were only male cats, the cats would soon become extinct. If there were only female cats, cats would also still become extinct. So a species only maintains its existence because it has these different elements and there's a reciprocal relationship with them, they reproduce. The same holds true for every plant. Okay. In people, a feminine nature is found latent in men and a masculine nature is found latent in women. So that sentence has been there in the Divine Principle book since the 1950s or whenever it was written, this particular edition. And people didn't really pay much attention to it. And there you got the drawing, masculine with a bit of feminine, feminine with a bit of masculine. So when we look at, from a scientific point of view, we actually look at this as a sort of distribution of male and female characteristics from a scientific point of view. You find these here are people who are women. Their sex is their female sex. These are people here whose sex is male. When you look in terms of characteristics, you see that women, generally speaking, that's a typical woman there is, mostly female characteristics. A typical man is mostly male characteristics. But you see that also most men have got a lot of female characteristics and most women have got a lot of, or some male characteristics. And so if you look, this male here on this spot will be more female-like than most males and the majority of females actually. So you do find men who are men by sex actually in terms of appear or behave in a very feminine kind of way. And here, this female will be more male-like than most females and the majority of males. Yeah, this is just the way it is. Yeah. So more female-like personality profile, more male-like personality profile. And so that is what you would expect from the principle understanding of the nature of reality. So I found, oh, that's really interesting. The principle actually describes the nature of reality very well. And so there we have that. So that's, so as I said, you got this old gender roles, which comes very much out of the Greek view of opposites. Either you're one or you're the other. There's no idea that they're opposites. There isn't the idea here of a mixing. Either you're this left or you're right. Either you're good or you're evil. Either this or that. Okay, so that fed into this sort of gender stereotypes. and also gender roles. But life is changing. And so nowadays, this is the way things have changed. People's views on gender roles have changed hugely in the UK and most other countries in the world over the last, last 40 years or so. Yeah, traditionally, most people thought a man's job was to earn money, and here people disagreed. And that's a very traditional kind of view, 1950s view. But nowadays, most people disagree with traditional gender stereotypes and gender roles. Yeah, they think that there's no reason why women shouldn't do this, that, and the other. No reason why men shouldn't do this, that, and the other either. So the old gender roles, which are rooted in a particular philosophy, are breaking down. So all being re-examined. So let's have a look at gender then itself. What is gender? The state of being male or female, typically used with reference to social and cultural differences rather than biological ones. Now this is important. Okay, it's connected to referring not the biology, but the social and cultural differences. In that sense, it's quite subjective. Biology is very objective. Either you're XY or you're XX. That's objective. That's just reality. Whereas a gender is very much more subjective. So these are the different elements that go into people's sense of gender. So partly it's our body, our biological sex, our experience of our own body, how society genders bodies, and how others interact based on our body. So as you grow up, particularly as you become a teenager, then girls, as they go through adolescence and their physical body changes, they will notice that the way men look at them, older men look at them, changes. Yeah, they notice that. And they realize, oh, as my body changes, the way people look at me changes. In that sense. So until recently, sex and gender have assumed to overlap. Only recently have people thought, oh, there's a difference, big difference in sex and gender, almost like an arbitrary thing. But until recently, it's assumed they just overlap. So another aspect is our deeply held internal sense of self as male, female, a blend of both or neither, who we are internally know ourselves to be. So as one's growing up, as an adolescent especially, you start to think about these things and try to form one's sense of self, one's identity, and sort of what characteristics we have. Also partly in terms of our relationship with others and how others treat us, also forms our sense of self. And the final aspect of gender is expression, how we present our gender in the world and how society, culture, community, and family perceive, interact with, and try to shape our gender. So of course there's that pressure. So gender expression is also related to gender roles and how society uses those roles to try to enforce conformity to current gender norms. So this is the social and cultural differences or social and cultural expectations. So this is I would say is where the problem arises. There's certain kind of understanding of this is what a woman is, this is what a man is. These are our social and cultural expectations towards a man, social and cultural expectations towards a woman, and that then becomes gender. People are expected to conform to these particular gender identities. A lot of people, especially in the past, were quite happy to go along with that. Nowadays, a lot of people just aren't happy to go along with that. Yeah, so that's what a lot of things are changing then. So gender identity is a sense of oneself as a male or female, and this sense of self develops in a series of stages. So gender stereotypes are culturally defined expectations about the sexes, which begin developing early in life and become more extensive as children grow older. So you'll see that, though, you'll often experience this yourself as you're growing up, certain kind of expectations that as a boy you should behave like this, as a girl you should behave like that. But the important thing to remember from the principal point of view is that the fallen culture leads to fallen gender stereotypes and expectations. So we looked at the Greeks, that was their understanding, that was a fallen understanding of the nature of reality. Men are good, women are bad. Men have a mind, which Aristotle's, another quote I forgot from Aristotle, men have a mind, men have a mind, women just a body. Another aspect, he said. So that damaged women's education hugely in Europe for 2,000 years. So the important thing to remember is the society we're living in is a fallen society with a fallen understanding of sexuality, and the development of fallen gender stereotypes, which is why women have been so badly mistreated and why all kinds of expectations are being put upon men and upon women. In other words, there's the idea there's one right way of being a man and one right way of being a woman. And if you don't conform to that, there's a problem. So that's the problem. A lot of the problem is the fallen world in which we live. You have these fallen gender expectations. So when we engage in this argument, we need to tell people, and we need to remember, we're not trying to support the patriarchy. We're not trying to support and defend the way things have been in the past for hundreds and thousands of years. We don't, that's fallen. We don't want anything to do with that. We don't want to support it, except that we recognize it's problematic, it's wrong, it's fallen because of what happened, yeah? What we're trying to create is something new, something different, yeah? With a different understanding of the nature of reality, different kind of binaries than the binaries, the binary opposites that Aristotle, Pythagoras talked about, and that dominate all the discourse on this subject till today. So that's really important to remember. So again, also important is to have a few facts. A few facts never went amiss. This is the integrated household study, which is done by a government department every year. They do research and surveys of hundreds of thousands of people, and they ask questions. And anyway, so one of the questions they ask every year is, you know, how do people self-identify? How do people define themselves in terms of sex and gender? How do they see themselves? And you can see, basically, it's pretty stable. About 93, 94%, yeah, about 94% of people self-identify as heterosexual. About 1% of people self-identify as being gay or lesbian. About 0.5 to 1% of people self-identify as being bisexual. And then about 0.5% of people define themselves as trans or intersex or something else. There's, you know, there's a whole list of things that. And then about 4% of people either don't know, never thought about it. Sometimes people are asexual, they never even think about these things, or they just don't want to respond. All these surveys are done anonymously. There's no people just fill in these forms when they get them through the post. There's no pressure to, you know, nobody knows. So that's really important. So sometimes when people talk about these things, you get the impression, oh, gays and lesbians, it's 10% of the population. But there's lots of stuff goes around saying, oh, it's 10%. The reality is that. And so, you know, out of this 2.5%, so when you add this bit here up, it's about 2.5%. The 2.5% that are not heterosexual, then this has also been analyzed by the government, and there's 2.5 and 61% of the 2.5% identified as gay or lesbian, 1/4 of the 2.5% as bisexual, a small number as pansexual, 4%, asexual 2%, and queer as 1%. 30% of the respondents were self-identified as transgender. Of the total sample, 7% were non-binary, 3.5 were trans women. Of this percent, that's of this, you know, small percent that identify themselves as trans, 3.5 were trans women, transition, 3% were trans men who also transition. So when you look at these numbers, this is 3.5% of 2.5%. It's a tiny fraction of people. But when you look at the media and social media, you get the impression there's a huge proportion of people are either gay or lesbian or bisexual or trans, you know, but actually the reality is a fraction of a percent in reality. But they take up so much of the bandwidth. They take up so much of the social media, take up so much of the bandwidth and so much of the discourse, and their views dominate the discourse until today. Don't think it's very democratic myself, but that's the fraction of a percent decide what is right and what is wrong. And it's the fraction of the percent who determine what is politically correct today. And it's the fraction of the percent who cancel people who disagree with them. And so this is really shocking. This is the Guardian newspaper. It's a very liberal newspaper in Britain. And they analyzed this. You know, gay Britain, 1.5%. Whoa, they're shocked. And they looked at this, and the claim that just 1.5% of people, gay, lesbian, or bisexual, will come as a surprise to some. Yeah, actually it came as a surprise to everybody. Yeah, because the gay lobby has been spent 30 years or 40 years now telling people it's 10%. So when we think about this, okay, what's going on here? So I would say a lack of understanding regarding the distribution of sex-related personality. Okay, one other point. So the point here is about marriage and everything should be for the overwhelming majority of the population. Legislation about marriage should be for the overwhelming majority of the population. Marriage through the whole of human history has always been defined by a particular relationship between a man and a woman, or sometimes several women, if it's a polygamous society. And so marriage law has always defined marriage as being between a man and a woman. And so that is very democratic because 95 or 94% of the population self-identify as heterosexual. So marriage has always been a heterosexual institution. Gay marriage, or the idea that gay people say we ought to be able to get married, there ought to be marriage between men and women and women, this is what's called cultural appropriation. The minority of 1% have claimed for themselves a cultural institution that was established by the 94%. Is that democratic, that the 1% should change something which is appropriate and developed and established by the 94%? I don't think that's very democratic, to be honest. I think that's dictatorship. You know, to be honest, I just think, well, is that fair? Is that right? I'm not saying that gay and lesbian people shouldn't have their own relationship and their own legal status, such as civil partnership, which is what there was in the UK. That's fine. But I think taking marriage is for themselves and changing the meaning of marriage is cultural appropriation. And yeah, so a lack of understanding regarding the distribution of sex-related personality and behavioral differences has led to confusion that impacts children who fall at the extreme ends of the distribution. So because there's this gender stereotype, so when a man or a boy finds that he has lots of feminine characteristics, it's very easy to get confused and think, oh, maybe I'm a girl born in a boy's body because I don't conform to the gender expectations for a man. Yeah, and maybe a girl who's obviously got a female body, XX, maybe she feels, oh, actually I prefer playing football, I prefer playing rough games, maybe I like maths and science, maybe I'm a boy born in a girl's body. Yeah, but that's because she feels I don't conform to the social and cultural expectations of what it is to be a girl. And the boy doesn't feel he conforms to social and cultural expectations of what it is to be a boy. And that leads to a lot of confusion. Yeah. Wholly female or wholly male. The fact is, no child is actually born in the wrong body. Adults should expand the understanding of what normal male and female behavior and preferences look like. In other words, get rid of all these old gender stereotypes. Yeah. Because they're fallen stereotypes, which would lead them to appreciate that being male or female comes with a wider range of personality preferences and possibilities than the old stereotypes would have us believe. Yeah, so you don't need to think, oh, I'm born in the wrong body. We just need to realize actually there's nothing wrong with being a man or a boy, but having more feminine characteristics, that's just normal. I'm at that end of the spectrum. And for a girl, the same thing. Oh, I'm just more at that end of the spectrum. That's just who I am. I'm not, don't have to have this body dysphoria, as it's called, and then don't have to go through these sex changes. And so it's been researched in the UK, most of the children who go through sex changes are gay, actually. That's the way it is. That's statistically. And also they're often people who are autistic or on the autistic spectrum. Again, it's just a fact. There's been a big controversy about this because they don't conform to the expectations of the society and the culture. So that's why they think I'm born in the wrong body. That's why the majority of young people in the UK who go along for sex changes are either gay and or people who are on the autistic spectrum who can't grasp the nuances of this. Okay, so then you have all this stuff going about fluid generations, etc. I'm binary, I'm non-binary. The whole thing about non-binary is a rejection of the Pythagoras' view of binary opposites. That's really what's going on there, all this stuff. Anyway, this is an interesting final comment. Someone called Nigel Bigar, someone I respect a lot. He's a Christian professor at Oxford. Commenting on this, he said, what I don't get is a demand that society should reform its language, a lot of that going on, its census forms, its lavatories, and its sleeping arrangements around an ever-growing taxonomy of genders, which takes its bearings from stereotypes that have long been discredited, and either says nothing new or vanishes into private obscurity. So, for example, we're told that non-binary describes any gender that transcends the accepted system of male and female. That's going back to Pythagoras. But beyond the one that feminism has already dismantled, the feminist movement dismantled the patriarchal understanding of gender stereotypes. Beyond the one that feminism has already dismantled, what other system remains? So what is the system that they're referencing here? Further, where exactly does the difference lie between bigender, combining male and female, and intergender, somewhere in between? And how do these amount to anything more than the feminist rejection of traditional stereotypes? And in the case of agender and aporagender, which supposedly transcend maleness, femaleness, and anything in between, what qualities are left to give them meaning? So by having dismantled the whole system, feminism dismantled this whole patriarchal gender stereotype system, I said in the last century mostly, then, well, what's going on here? What are the meaning of all these words? It's really confusing. Anyway, so that's just a few thoughts really. And I'll just stop there. There's all kinds of really serious implications for, this is just a typical thing here. A man who thinks he's a woman, claims he's a woman, enters athletics, obviously beats the women easily because it's a male, he's a woman in a male's body with just as much testosterone as a male. If a man who tried to transition to having a woman's body, if the amount of testosterone in his body was reduced to the same level of testosterone as in a typical woman, he would die. That's just the way it is. Yeah. So that's why it's deeply unfair that trans athletes should be allowed to dominate and take over women's athletics. There's lots of other things like this. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing there. I hope there's enough there for you to engage in some useful conversations. Gosh, it's not that time already. I've talked too long as usual. So I'll hand you back to Alex.
Thank you, William. Did you have any questions for us today, by any chance?
Oh gosh, I forgot to think about it.
Oh, no problem. We can maybe just focus more on main group discussions here, unless you can think of someone on the spot. Does anyone have any questions for William right now? Thank you so much for your talk again.
One question I have is, what are some of the main, it's open to anyone, what are some of the main societal expectations of men and women that you are aware of? Yeah, some that you're aware of And that's just an open question to anybody. And do you accept them or do you reject them? If anyone has any thoughts, only if they have any thoughts. I mean, I might as well. I asked the question because it's on my mind. I already have a point. So, yeah, I think for me one thing for me is I would say I'm quite a sensitive person. I easily cry when I watch movies or when moved by something. And yeah, as a guy, I definitely felt that pressure growing up, especially, I mean, even with BCs, like, there's this whole lad culture, especially with English BCs, there's this lad culture. You have to be a lad, and play football and stuff like that. I like playing football, but I just like talking about deeper things and sharing my heart and that kind of thing. And I just couldn't relate to many brothers, at least in the UK. I relate to Alex a lot. I'm really grateful for you, Alex Stacey. Anyway, there's a few people like that, and Steve as well, who I've gotten to know, who I can really connect to like that. But yeah, I think that's one thing I've been aware of, and yeah, and because I think Uncle William showed that, that men are thick-skinned and women are thin-skinned, but I've often found that women tend to have thicker skin than men. That's what I've tended to find most of the time. Yeah, that's just one thing I'm aware of.
Thank you. Great points. Yeah, I definitely felt that there's a lad culture in the UK as well, so I can relate to that at university, especially. You needed to have testosterone and show your masculinity, otherwise you're not a true man. But yeah, I think Stephen just puts another question in the chat if no one had any points.
I was just repeating Benny's question.
Oh.
Yeah, because I'm not sure if my mark is working, to be honest. It didn't work when I asked the question.
It's working now.
Cool. Because I had asked what the question was before. But I have a point on that. For some reason, women are always expected, or kind of like, it's something that I've encountered a lot, and I kind of like, it upsets me. It's just that people don't expect me to be able to be strong, or people don't expect me to be able to lift things or move things or repair things. And it's quite upsetting to think that it happens a lot. Or I've had people say, oh, don't do that, I can do it for you, or oh, you're not strong enough, or oh, don't break your back, or oh, it's fine, I'll do it. And it's very upsetting to see every single time. And maybe it's just me, but I every time I hear that, I'm more determined to do whatever I was gonna do beforehand, because I don't like people seeing me as weak just because I'm female, for example. So it's something I've encountered a lot of times. Also, apparently I'm not able to be loud as well, which I'm already kind of loud, but I would be my Portuguese side. But yeah, it's got a few things that happen, and I don't think are that yeah, shouldn't be accepted much. That's my take on it. Is it frustrating when people offer help to you, like with physical labor, or is it more the presumption that you can't do it? Like, I think it's the way they say it, as like the implication of like, oh, you're a girl, you can't do it, or it's more the way they say it. It's not the fact that they offer help. I'm fine with that. It's the way they imply I can't do it when I know for sure I can, because I've done it multiple times. Yeah. Especially when it's something very small and it's very ridiculously thought that I can't do it. That's the more upsetting part. Yeah, that's.
I'd rather just comment rather than ask the question. I just want to say thank you, Uncle William, for that presentation and the actual scientific breakdown with graphs and facts and tables, because that helps actually to well, it helped me to actually better understand the entire concept, because just looking at the generation, well, our generation, we're becoming a bit more liberal on a lot of things. And I feel like, you know, we are demanding rights. We have rights to this and that. But, you know, from a principal point of view, like, we are not taking responsibility for that. You know, we just want nice things for ourselves, but we don't actually, you know, like, as I say, take that responsibility. So, and actually, this was kind of just a general, I don't know if I can say it's a concern or a worry as to where are we actually heading, because I think we're becoming more and more confused. And I think that the explanation of there being the gender roles and stereotypes definitely helped me to understand why we're diverting and why we're forming all these different communities and groups, and we're trying to find acceptance, because I feel like that's what it is really. So yeah, I feel like that's just the point that we're missing. And when I was looking at the UK numbers, actually South Africa mimics the UK a lot. Actually, we use so much of UK data for almost everything. So it was quite interesting to see, and it's something that I want to look into. But personally, it's not that I have like any feeling against them. I can't say, you know, I disregard them, but I just more want to understand how the mind of the LGBT community, because it's better trying to understand them to solve. It's better to try and solve a problem than try to eliminate it. I'm not saying I'm trying to eliminate them, but I'm just saying that it's better that I get a better understanding. So thank you.
Indeed, yeah. Appreciate that. I was just thinking, because maybe most of us want to discuss in maybe smaller groups for at least 20 minutes, we can maybe just discuss generally without any questions, and then get back together for 10 minutes. Yeah, is that okay with all of you?
I think it's good to have like some prompts, I would say, to help the discussion. Yeah, but maybe it would still work. I don't know.
Can you think of anything, Willaim, at the moment?
Well, I mean,
A couple of discussion
I thought
points.
that's a good question you asked, or somebody asked. To what extent do people today, you know, what are the sort of expectations you might find within society, but also what are the expectations within, you know, our own spiritual community, you know, and how does one address these things, or how does one engage with conversations with people that you don't necessarily agree with?
Great question. I think Bauer had another one as well.
So yeah, I think just for the discussion, so that we can have some kind of like discussion point. Like one question I will have for all of you: should a man help a woman if she's struggling with something physical, for example, like carrying her luggage? Because I feel like some people are gonna say different things about that. So if you want, we can use that as a discussion point.
It's not the intention, it's how you do it. That's all I'm gonna say. Because yeah, that's all I'm gonna say.
Okay, cool. So there's three questions, I guess. So two questions. So first one is, how does one engage with someone who has like strong opinions towards LGBT? If they say, oh, yeah, this marriage is right, gay marriage is right. If they say people should be fluid, or like do what makes them happiest. So yeah, how to engage with that if you want to engage with that. And the other one is, should a man help a woman if she's carrying a luggage or if she's struggling with something like to do with strength, or like, I don't know, just something that she could possibly do herself. Just and yeah, the third one is what a question you want to ask the group. So it's your pick. I put these in the chat and I'll open up the groups. I hope you have a good 20 minutes. But recording again. Oh. Yeah, if it's 1% of the population that identify as gay, and in the UK, let's say that's out of 70 million people, that's almost 700,000, which is close to 1 million people that would identify as such. So yeah, like well, you said there's civil partnership for them, but like marriage is like an ideology that everyone wants to kind of achieve in life, and in some sense, like it's some people say it's like, oh, the most liberating day of their lives, or like the most happiest day of their lives as such, or so when they feel they come together. And I'm just wondering, yeah, if there's like civil partnership for gay people, it seems like they weren't satisfied with it, hence why they wanted to legalize gay marriage. I'm just wondering, like, yeah, it's yeah, some kind of middle ground or like a solution, or like I just throwing ideas out there, like what other 700,000 people we just expected to let's not get that same thrill or to look forward to, or as such as I know it's a bit more like materialistic as it's a single day or like just a title.
Well, I mean, there's no reason why a civil partnership ceremony shouldn't be as meaningful for that particular couple, gay couple, as a marriage for a heterosexual couple. The language would obviously need to be appropriate, as it is appropriate for when heterosexuals get married. The language is very heterosexual because it's speaking to them. So obviously for gay people having a civil partnership, then the language should be suited for them, and it should be also a day of great celebration. So when civil partnership appeared in the UK, a lot of gay people, men and women, they went and had this partnership, and they're really happy and they celebrated, and they have very, very similar, if not the same, financial benefits as people who get married, and not that there are very many of those anyway. So there's no reason why the civil partnership shouldn't have the same legal kind of benefits that marriage has. It's just there's no particular reason why. But, I mean, that's what I think. To be honest, the whole language of a marriage ceremony has now had to be changed. The whole legal definition of marriage has had to be changed. So if you think about the way marriage has always existed as a particular kind of relationship between a man and one or more women, it has been defined for the purpose of sex, for having children, and for the upbringing of children. It's mutually beneficial, both the man and the woman, because the man makes a commitment. He's going to love this woman, take care of her through good times or bad. And the woman also makes a commitment. She won't have sex with anybody else. So there's, all kinds of legitimate concerns on both sides. And so marriage exists in all institutions anthropologically all over the world throughout human history. Marriage wasn't an institution invented by the government. It's just an institution which has always existed. And it was described by anthropologists, and it always had this characteristics: a man and one, having children, upbringing of children, and these things. So it's just a description of this relationship. So when you see these kind of relationships over and over again, you want to say, okay, what is the word that describes this kind of relationships and distinguishes it from other kinds of relationships? And so the word is marriage. That's what distinguishes that relationship from other relationships. So just like when you're trying to make sense of the nature of reality, you have words which describe and fit, something, plants or animals or whatever, or relationships. So that's just the way it is. So when the government comes along and decides it's going to change the definition and nature of marriage, the question is, for me, does the state have the authority to do that? Because marriage as an institution is not the creation of government, is not the creation of religion, it pre-exists religion, is not the creation of the state. So on what authority does the government or the state have to redefine the nature of marriage? I don't personally think the state or the government has the authority to do that, because the state and the government didn't actually create the institution of marriage. It's just a human institution which has always existed.
Can I add something?
Yeah, of course.
Is that okay? Part of the problem with you know, as Willaim had said, very clearly, it doesn't belong to government. It's always existed as a social institution, as the place where we give our children the best start in life. Yeah, and we know that when marriage rates decline, cultures go into decay because the children are less protected. This is, well written in history. So it's very important that society has a place which says this is the place where we look after the biological children so that they have their chance to make a positive future for their lives. Yeah? And the West, Europe grew because marriages rates were quite strong, and the children grew and in protected relationships, and they became more wholesome, more Christ-like, step by step. And as they did so, the West developed because the people were more wholesome and more whole, and intelligent, and what. So you really need, as a society, a place which says this is the place where we raise the biological children, because they're the future and they are best protected when raised by their mother and father. And you have a challenge, because once you say marriage is between two men, then suddenly children can be bought and sold by these couples, either through IVF or through surrogacy. And children don't actually want to be bought and sold. They don't want to grow up knowing their mother sold them, or they were bought, by sperm. There are websites now like Anonymous Us and Them Before Us, where their children, now they're getting to adulthood, are saying, who allowed me to be bought and sold?
Yeah, but
we have a problem because the children don't want to be bought and sold, but the government says, yes, you can be bought and sold. So who gives the government the right to say to a child, we allow another person to buy you? Yeah. So there's a problem with the government saying things which it doesn't really actually have a right to say. And it doesn't have a right to say, you can be bought and sold because I say so.
Well, I think we're going a bit off topic here. This is a different problem.
It isn't. It's what happens when you redefine marriage. Then suddenly you end up hurting another group of people.
Okay, but what about adoption? And like, there's lots of orphans out there.
We're not talking about just adoption, though. We're talking about the actual selling of children.
Okay.
So the point I'm trying to make is that other people get hurt. It's not just those children get hurt. Other children get hurt because the definition of marriage is changed from this is where we protect children to this is where we validate adult love. The definition was changed. So you don't have a place actually which is now defined as this is the social place where we protect children, because buying and selling children doesn't protect children. Yeah. So society struggles now because we don't have a space which actually really means this is the best place to protect children, and we will suffer the children suffer the consequences because of that. So it's a problem when you go around. The government says we have a right to redefine something which means a certain social purpose, and they say no, it doesn't mean that. It means it's about love between adults. No, it isn't. It's about the protection of children, and it always has been. So if more people get hurt than are helped. And that's the problem. When you look at the data, all the different groups of people that are hurt because they redefine marriage, You have to look at the damage. You always have to say, who else will get hurt? Who will have their rights taken away from them? And who will get hurt? And the children got their rights taken away from them, that group of children, and other groups of children got their rights taken away from them as well. So more children get hurt and they grow up and they're the future, so society decays. And that's a problematic issue because the government thinks it's doing something good. But you have to look at always the people that get hurt.
Yeah, it's a true shame.
Okay.
When that occurs, and if people are bought and sold, that's a shame as well. Kind of brought into the world for certain reasons. But yeah, Bea, did you have a question? I just want to say something.
Yeah, it's a bit different. So if anyone wants to say anything about this topic, it was a different question.
I just have one small point, very, very briefly, but just, I think the thing about buying and selling children is it's historically happened with if you look at ancient civilizations, it was quite normal actually. And it's not only homosexual couples, like heterosexual couples would do that as well.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah, that's
true. We couldn't really define marriage if we didn't already allow heterosexual couples to violate the rights of children. Yeah? If we didn't already allow that, we wouldn't have allowed this heterosexual couples to do it. Yeah? It doesn't mean it's right. I'm just saying it expands rapidly after this. That's all. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and then one last question before we close. Bea, if you want to ask.
Thank you. I think this is something that I was just wondering about. Like, it's always kind of a question that kind of changes my perspective. Like, it's easy to have a very strong perspective on like the whole LGBT topic, where it's like, yeah, I agree. No, yeah, I disagree. Like, this is not right. You know, like all these logically why it's not beneficial. I guess like the marriage thing comes in and like bearing of children and stuff. But like my question is like, would this change? Would this like strong opinion or strong view change if, for example, my child would identify with this group and it's not like, you know, it's not like they're choosing it or something. It's not like, oh yeah, I want to, I want to go against your idea and I want to be gay or something. It's like, that's that's how they identify it. They cannot get rid of it and they try and struggle with it and stuff. So my question is like, would anything change? I think that's where like the layers kind of come in for me. I think it was easy before to say more like, oh yeah, I disagree, I don't think it's the best, but then I just think it's easy to talk about something where you talk about the idea and not the person. So yeah, I was just wondering what's your thoughts on it, Uncle William, or anyone else? Like, yeah.
Oh, I see. Well, I mean, first of all, I think every single human being is a son or daughter of God. And, you know, everyone has a unique divine value, irrespective of whether they have a same-sex attraction or heterosexual or gay or lesbian or bi, whatever. Every single human being is a unique individual expression of God and has unique value. That's the first thing. And so, you know, if someone has this same-sex attraction, that doesn't mean that they're less valuable or less loved by God than anybody else. They're still an individual expression of God. And I think that's really important to remember. And that if one has children who have a same-sex attraction or anything really, at the end of the day, they're still your children and you should love them unconditionally. A conditional love is, oh, I will only love you if you conform to my expectations of what you ought to be like. God loves people unconditionally, whether they self-identify as heterosexual, bisexual, queer, whatever. God still loves them unconditionally. God's love isn't conditional upon them conforming to his expectations of how they should see themselves. That's the first thing I would say, really. And, you know, I have friends who are homosexual. I have a number who are gay. And, you know, to be honest, I think they're just perfectly good people. I have one very good friend. I haven't seen him for a long time, actually. Anyway, he was a Jewish. He grew up in a very Orthodox Jewish background. and he loved God and wanted to serve his community. But at the same time, he had a same-sex attraction that he wrestled with hugely. So he decided, okay, maybe I'll go off and study in the yeshiva in Jerusalem. So he went to study in Orthodox yeshiva. He still wrestled with this issue. Then he became qualified to become a rabbi. As a rabbi, of course, he was expected to get married. So he thought, well, if I get married and have children, maybe this will solve my problem. And he did that. And all the time he was living a life of complete conflict, because that wasn't who he was. That wasn't how he saw himself. That wasn't the kind of emotions and feelings that he had. And so, you know, he couldn't manage this anymore. And so what he did is he told his wife, I think he had 3 or 4 children at this stage, about this. And obviously for her, it was traumatizing, totally shocking. It was terrible for her and for their children, for him to come out in that kind of way. Anyway, he felt he couldn't live a dishonest life anymore. But at the same time, he is a rabbi in an Orthodox community, but he could no longer continue to be a rabbi in an Orthodox community. But he loved God and he wanted to serve people and to teach people. And so he joined a liberal synagogue. And so that's why I met him through a liberal synagogue in my local liberal synagogue. And then I realized, you know, he was a person who's wrestled with this issue deeply. And very unselfish, very this, and this, and this. But it was a really deep thing. And so I realized, yeah, this is a really deep thing, and you can't judge people or accuse people or say people are going to go to hell or whatever. One just has to, you know, to be honest, I can't imagine anything worse than to feel growing up in that kind of incredibly conservative spiritual community that where you want to serve God and you find that you have this same-sex attraction and you wrestle with it. I can't imagine. It's not that he chose to be like this. It's not that he could solve it by studying or praying more. It's not that he could solve it by getting blessed by God in marriage in his Jewish community. It's not that he could solve it in any way at all. That's just how he was. And he had to find a way to deal with this. And I think it's really complicated. So, you know, if I had any children who were, and that's how they were, then of course I would continue to love them unconditionally because they're my children. It wouldn't make me love them any less or think any less highly of them. Because what's most important is whether you're living a moral life, an unselfish life. Do you steal? Do you murder? You know, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That's much more important than, you know, this, you finding yourself part of this 1%. Not that anybody chooses to be like that. That's just, you know. Is that any help, Beatrice?
Thank you. Yeah, I think that makes sense. I just wonder, for example, I guess for people that like have very strong opinions on disagreeing, or even just people for like, for example, if you lecture quite a lot on this topic, or if you try and teach people about like how it can come about, or how people can identify, and then I don't know, I guess I guess we always kind of take a side, right? It's not like I'm saying oh, people that are LGBT are evil and they should die in hell or something, but it's like between two things we always kind of have a hierarchy, right? So we always consider something to be better than the other. So I always wonder, but if my child was identified as LGBT, would I openly tell them, or like would I be so quick to show them this hierarchy that I have? And would this change? Would like, because I love them so deeply, right? I wouldn't want them to be on the wrong, or I wouldn't want them, you know, like for example with prisoners, when like, yeah, kids, okay, maybe like people about 20s or 18s or young adults, when they go to prison, parents usually have kind of a feeling of unhappiness towards the system, towards how the police runs, how the prisons run and everything. But before their child went to prison, that wasn't an issue because the police was seen as like a source of protection, right? So it changes this perspective quite a lot, and then the approach to the situation, right? So then in that sense, I just wonder, you know, would things change quite a bit the way we see? I mean, I think it is very clear to me that, you know, God loves everyone, or that parents would love their children unconditionally, no matter, you know, if they identify as with the LGBT group. So yeah, I don't know if I'm asking the question quite clearly, or if you understand what I mean.
Well, I mean, as you know, everyone, you know, people respond to this situation differently. Some people, if they find their child is like that, they reject them. That's happens as well. Some people, when their child goes to prison, they want nothing more to do with them ever again, and they reject them. Whereas there's some, you know, parents who is obviously not happy their child committed whatever crime and ended up in prison, but they still go and visit them. And, you know, because they feel, okay, even though my child did this, this, and this, and deserved to go to prison, or maybe even didn't deserve child. And if that happens, obviously it's, you know, one has to process this and one has to digest this situation. And as I said, different people do it differently. It's not an easy situation. I'm not saying it's not easy. It's really difficult. It's really difficult for the person. It's really difficult for the parents, because, you know, and then obviously, as I told you from that little story of a friend of mine, it was incredibly difficult for, you know, his wife and children. And so, you know, looking at that, I would suggest, well, okay, if that's how you see yourself, maybe it's better not to get married, to be honest. Or if you do, at least you should make it very clear to the person you're going to marry, I have a same-sex attraction. You know, don't be, you know, one has to be really upfront about this. I know there's some, you know, first and second gen, they try to make this work, you know, getting married and blessed, and occasionally it does, but very often it doesn't. And they struggle, and the relationship just breaks down in the end. So I would never, to be honest, I wouldn't encourage people who have a same-sex attraction to get married to somebody, you know, of the opposite gender. It's really difficult for both sides. I don't think there's, you know, to me, there's just no easy solution to this kind of problem. And as you know yourself, there are, you know, I don't know how many, but there are second gen who, you know, self-identify as being gay or lesbian, or different ones of these categories, like just like there is in any part of society.
Thank you. Yeah, I think there's no straightforward answer to it, or it's not an easy question or an answer. But yeah, thank you. I think that's some good points.
Oh, sorry, it's past closing time. It's okay to continue discussions afterwards if we'd like to. Sorry, I've been meaning to close for a while, but I really appreciate the answers, the talk today, Willaim. Thank you so much.
Yeah, sorry, I forgot to read the guidelines. I went on too long, and I should have come up with some. It should have been more open-ended with some discussion questions. I'm sorry about that, Alex. Please, next time if you invite me, please remind me what I'm supposed to be doing.
No problem. I apologize. It's my responsibility to do that, and I will make sure I continue doing that. Yeah. So thank you so much again. It's still lovely to hear your thoughts and present some statistics, and I still got to chat a little bit.
Thanks for inviting me, and so good to see you and listen to you as well. Thank you.
Yeah, I think Bauer had some announcements before our closing prayer.
We can do the prayer now, it's okay.
Okay, so yeah, thank you all for joining. Again, would anyone like to do a closing prayer? Did you guys hear me? Okay, maybe I can do one, even though I'm lagging a little bit. Yeah, if you don't mind closing your eyes and joining me. Yeah, dearest Heavenly Father and dearest parents, thank you so much for our opportunity to gather here today and hear and discuss a little bit about this, this kind of topic that we don't often talk too much about here in this community. Or like, and hence we don't kind of know our own thoughts sometimes because we can't express our own thoughts or think about it, articulate it too much. So yeah, thank you for giving us a slight chance to articulate it and hear other people's thoughts on it. And yeah, sensibly discuss these things. And I hope, yeah, we can continue with our lives and live fruitfully and love everyone, no matter what. And yeah, I hope we have a lovely weekend and enjoy the rest of our week. And I pray in my name, Alexander Stacy, Jew.
True. So yeah, thanks for coming, everyone. Yeah, today was a little different. Yeah, I'm sure. It was nice. I mean, it was nice. But yeah, anyway. So we're gonna continue as usual. But yeah, actually, I do have some real announcements. Kind of. Me and Isaac were kind of thinking of something, and we wanted to ask you if, for now, just if the general interest is there. So yeah, Isaac, do you want to take over as my other wife?
My connection's really bad. Can you still hear me?
Yeah.
All right, okay. We were just thinking of running a small fundraising team. We're not really sure where or for how long. Just want to know how many people would be interested in joining. That's all.
Do you have any details about this? What kind of fundraising it would be? Like it's still a preliminary.
Literally with the very first stages, so we don't know. We just want to know like if it's going to be like 5 people or something. So
I mean,
okay, how can they contact you if they want to join in?
I mean, so yeah, we would want to do it in Europe, as I was asking, but yeah, it's just, yeah, we had the idea and we are asking if people are interested, and if people are interested, we would go further into development. So if you guys would like raise hands for now, and then afterwards, like we can see how